here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Boris Williams, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, all that other groovy stuff. Was the drummer with The Cure for 10 years, beginning in 1984, and then went into various other musical projects, but has recently collaborated and formed a band, or a sort of musical creative combo, called Vamberator, who've got a new album out titled Age of Loneliness. I will put a link in the notes below so you can find it. This is a collaboration with Jem, who was one half of Shelleyan, Orphan, who I spoke to a few months ago, and in fact a few years ago as well. So you can find out the interview as well, but you're going to find out more about The Cure, Boris's life, and much, much more. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Boris, it's over to you.
It's first of all, just to correct you, I know it's got on my Wikipedia page that I was born in 57. I was actually born in 51.
God, that's a big difference. You aren't the same age as my brother at all.
It's that occurred. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, I decided, they got it wrong, so I decided eventually to go onto Wikipedia and correct it, and put my proper date of birth in, which lasted all of 24 hours before somebody else recorrected it and said, whoever put it in 51 is wrong, because something about that was a misprint in one of the Cure books, and it should be 57. So they changed it back again.
Excellent. So, they know best.
So they know best. So what can I do? But yeah, I think, like I said, my kind of music, when I first got into music, it was 60s music, and when I first started playing in bands, there was the kind of that period of the kind of British blues explosion thing.
Yes.
A lot of interest in music over from America and soul and stuff. And so that was kind of, my roots, I suppose, and then with the 70s, I was sort of really big into David Bowie when that happened. More than, it's weird because I thought at the time when it started, T-Rex and things like that started coming, and Roxy Music, I thought it was exciting, but I also thought it was kind of a bit, the glam thing didn't kind of issue with me to start. So it's almost like that coloured my view of the whole thing being a bit kind of, I don't know, it seemed a bit kind of superfluous. And so then obviously I realised that the music underneath all that was really good,
Yes.
So there's a confluence with me and Jeb, because he grew up and, he kind of started getting into music probably the same era as you. So.
Yeah, well, and so did you, you were born in, is it right that you were born in France and then came over to the UK during the 50s or 60s?
It was in the 60s, yeah. I was born in France. Basically, it was kind of, my mother was travelling at the time, as it were, visiting people when I was born in Paris.
Right. Was she a bohemian person?
No, she wasn't actually. It was. I suppose it was not long after Second World War, and she eloped with. She was actually my roots actually from former Yugoslavia.
Right.
So she eloped with my birth father. Much to the consternation of my grandparents, her parents, because they were very anti-communist, and she sort of went off with a communist.
Right.
And so they ended up in Italy at a refugee camp, and then they ended up going to France.
Blimey, because this was all very soon after the war, actually, wasn't it?
It wasn't that long after the war. So then I was born in France, and then my parents decided to go back to Yugoslavia, went to Belgrade. And so for the first 7 years of my life, I was brought up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the meantime, my parents had split up, and my mother remarried.
So were you speaking French at this?
An English guy, and then so that's how I ended up in England.
Right. Were you speaking French at that point when you were?
I was speaking. Yeah, I mean, at that time, at that period, it was kind of a middle class thing to speak French in the home.
Yes.
We also spoke Serbian, so I was speaking both languages then. And then when we went to England, when my mother got together with my adoptive father, if you like, because I don't remember my blood father, so they split up when I was about 3. So we went to England, and he already had from a previous marriage 3 children, and there are 3 of us. So of course the language was a bit of a barrier. So they kind of insisted that we only speak English and forget about not allowed to speak amongst ourselves in our native language, because they saw it as, wanted us to integrate quickly.
Blimey.
So therefore I kind of lost really the languages,
Yes.
But so now,
was the childhood generally all right up until you left school?
Up until I went, well, it's a complicated situation in Belgrade. And then when I came to England, I went to boarding school, which I didn't enjoy.
No.
It was very, it's all boys boarding schools, and
God, in the 60s.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't,
no, probably not good, was it, really?
No.
So when you got to 16, did you do your O levels at that point, or did you stay on and do A levels?
I stayed on and did A levels, but I was halfway through, and I remember I was talking to my younger sister who was going to college, and she was sort of telling me about what it was like in college. And I was saying, God, that sounds amazing compared to what I'm doing. I decided to drop out of school. Well, I kind of, I said to my mother, I want to leave, and go to college instead of being in the boarding school. And I was very surprised that she just agreed instantly. And later she told me I was so kind of forthright about it and definite that she thought something had happened to me at schools, because there were always rumours about boarding schools and teachers and stuff, and that was going on in those boarding schools,
Yes.
I said fine. Yes, I ended up going to Guildford Tech.
Oh, brilliant!
And that's where I met the other guys in my first band.
So when you were talking about your blues explosion, I mean, you were that age where, when you were 16, that was 67, the summer of love. You talked about blues, but what about kind of psychedelia?
Oh, definitely psychedelia. I mean, I suppose that the music that influenced me most at that period when I was at school was, I suppose I'd say there are 4 albums. So it would be Jimi Hendrix, the first album, which was Are You Experienced?
Yes.
The Doors' first album.
Yes.
What was the other
Jefferson
one?
Airplane?
Jefferson Airplane came a little bit later. Yeah,
God,
definitely.
I'm guessing here. I'm trying to work out which the other 2 would be.
Yeah, my mind's kind of gone on it.
The Doors, Hendrix.
Oh yeah, Freak Out Frank Zappa
Oh, blimey.
was the other one, and another one was Velvet Underground, the first Velvet Underground
The
album.
Banana. God, so that was West Coast, then East Coast.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Quite different then. You weren't completely tuned in, turned on, and dropping out then.
At the time, yeah, it was.
Did you have? When did you? So, what was your first concert or gig you went to? Because there was a lot to pick, I would imagine, at that point when you were.
The most memorable gig I went to was a band called Free.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and that kind of blew me away.
I'd imagine
because they're just like, it was so powerful and everything. And the first gig I played with my first band was at Guildford Tech.
Right. When did drums start to appear? When did a musical instrument appear in your life then?
Well, it was a kind of made-up thing for me to start with. I didn't have a drum kit, and so at my parents' house, it had a sort of cellar which was given over to the kids, and I sit there with my mum's knitting needles.
Nice. We all did it.
The hell out of along to records out of the settees.
Right.
And then I kind of fronted myself. I hadn't played a drum kit, and I saw this poster at the college saying "Blues band need drummer."
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of got hold of them, and I kind of blagged my way, saying, "Well, I haven't got a drum kit, and I'm a bit rusty, but I'm your man," sort of thing. and they had a drummer who wanted to sort of do a DJ thing, which I'm kind of looking back thinking, were there DJs at that time? But apparently there were.
Right.
And he let me use his drum kit. He didn't want to play drums anymore. So that's how I kind of...
You got his gig. Blimey, that's incredible. Yeah. So that was when you were at Tech. And then sort of as the 70s progressed, you mentioned Bowie. So at that stage, did you stay on at college, university, or did you sort of...
No, I joined the band. We decided we're going to, go out and be famous. So I dropped out of college without getting any sort of qualifications or anything. And so, yeah, we'd sort of hunkered down in the guitarist's garage and started, working on original songs, as it were.
Right.
And that's how, in Wikipedia, for some reason, my kind of band history, it mentions a band called Tomato City, which I think somebody in that band put that in, and it's kind of stuck because it was kind of a joke name we had anyway.
Right.
And then we thought, well, we'll call ourselves that.
Yes.
Ended up being changed, but so it's bizarre because that's stuck in Wikipedia now, Tomato City, which probably didn't last that long anyway before.
Yeah. So did you manage to sort of eke out some sort of living at this garage, playing in a local band?
Yeah, living, not exactly. It was the guitarist's mum's house. She cooked for us, and basically we just lived like that. None of us had a job or anything.
You sound like a lot of...
We get the occasional gigs.
Yes.
We'd go to the odd audition. And we went to an audition in London. Usually it ended up pushing the van for the last bit because we ran out of petrol or whatever. But we had an audition with John Peel's label.
Dandelion.
Yeah, Dandelion. And it was basically, different bands all queuing up, quickly set up your kit and do 2 numbers and then next sort of thing.
Yes.
And afterwards, the guy from Dandelion said, yeah, I think, a really interesting sound you've got there. It really reminds me of the Iggy Pop and the
Stooges, yes.
Stooges, and we thought, Stooge, I don't know what that is, you know. So we all rushed there, you know, thinking, wow, we sound like somebody really, you know, on top of it. So rushed to a music shop and record shop, and you know, where they had in those days kind of listening booths. You could,
yes.
And they put on this, and we were like, shit, we sound like this. They sound cool. It's like really ragged. We thought we were slick and, you know, pretty slick sound and everything. So that kind of knocked us down
a notch. God. So as the 70s were progressing, you know, there was obviously, you know, the 60s ended on a downer with so many deaths, and then, you know, there was heavy metal, there was glam, there was prog rock, you know, jazz fusion stuff. So where were you sort of heading musically at this stage?
Well, in the 70s, it was by that time it was for me it was kind of well, I wouldn't say jobbing, you know. I was doing some sessions and getting what gigs I could. So I had a period where I was playing with like soul acts.
Right.
There's a band called the Flirtations, which was three women from North Carolina, kind of doing a Supremes type act.
Yeah.
And it's very cabaret, so we're doing that and doing the circuit around all the cabaret circuits in England, and that's where I first met. Actually, it might have been before that. Anyway, Roger O'Donnell sort of came onto the scene, doing similar kind of venues as me, and we ended up playing with the Flirtations and another soul act.
Okay.
So that's.
So were you? Yeah. So you were doing sort of. Were you doing holiday camps and places like that?
It wasn't holiday. It was. It was at the most glamorous. It was big, kind of these big. I can't remember. Sort of, they're called Talk of the West, Talk of the North. You know, they're big.
Yeah.
Halls. I suppose they're converted. They were kind of dance halls type things, and it was before the disco boom came in. So it was actually on the cusp of that, because when that came in, because we used to play like a residency of 6 nights, you know, one of those places.
Yeah.
Disco boom is kind of, you had more of a disco happening after the band, and then disco got bigger and bigger till in the end, you know, these sort of cabaret acts were only doing like 2 nights a week or something.
Yes. Did you ever get drumming lessons? Did you ever sort of go and
I decided, I was living in London at the time, and I decided, I was kind of working on my technique on my own a bit. And I decided, you know, it'd be good to get some lessons and get more work on my technique, improve it. And so I saw an ad for a guy that's giving lessons, and I turned up there, and he kind of did a demonstration of his prowess, as it were. and I thought, I do not want to end up playing like that, you know. So I kind of gave it a miss.
Yes.
So that's all. That's the only lessons I've.
That was that kind of avenue gone. So then, as the sort of mid-70s appeared, and then sort of you got Dr. Feelgood and the Doctors of Madness, and then punk started to appear. What was that like for you as the disco boom began and the cabaret scene was finishing?
With all the Dr. John and stuff like that. No.
Doctors of Madness.
Yeah.
Richard Strange.
I was playing in a band that had a residency in a pub in Islington, doing that kind of thing, you know. So it's kind of, so all that, I was kind of absorbing all those different influences, I guess, you know. And,
yes.
So Roger and I kind of bounced from one band to another and did quite a lot, you know. And then we ended up, let's form our own band. We were kind of getting influence with jazz, and mainly jazz fusion. So we had this kind of jazz fusion
nice
playing, and not sure how well it went down in the
Was it a
East.
bit like that? Was there that couple who called themselves, not a couple, but was it Raw Sex that used to have that kind of Roland Rivron? I can't remember his name now. They were a bit of a cabaret thing on the alternative comedy circuit. I don't know if you remember those two. I mean, they were, yes, there you go. I think you had to see it to believe it. So then, as the late 70s appeared, and we were sort of entering the world of Thatcherism, and then obviously the political landscape was changing. What was that next period like as you made that transition?
What, leading into the 80s?
Yes. Did you start working with people like the Thompson Twins and Kim Wilde?
Yeah, well, that kind of just before that, I was so I was living in London. I decided to buy a motorbike and become a motorcycle courier, which was quite kind of a hairy thing when you're on learner plates and not that on top of riding a bike and race around London.
Was it a 125 or 250?
It was a 250 in those days, yeah.
Crikey. In London.
It was called a Honda Dream.
Right,
50,
yes.
Which I think they were nicknamed a Honda Wet Dream because they were so underpowered. But so I was doing that. I was kind of very much in the doldrums at the time with music. There didn't seem to be anything really happening for me. I'd been in different bands, you'd form a band and then it would break up and you'd find something else.
Yes.
I had a residency in a club, kind of reggae club really, in Finchley Road in London. And it was kind of a very dark downstairs, underground cellar type place. And it was pretty much only the clientele were West Indian, and lots of smoke around and everything. And the guy running it, who was West Indian, was also, he was the owner, the manager, and the lead singer in the band. And I can't remember how I auditioned for it, but anyway, me and 4 other musicians sort of became the resident band every weekend. So that was my kind of livelihood. That those 2 nights at the weekend kept me kind of going financially through the week. Just but yeah, going into so all that is a struggle really, making a living, as it always is with musicians or generally. And so I kind of really kind of given up on the idea, of carrying on. So I was doing this, wondering what to do with myself, doing this motorcycle messaging, and then I got a phone call from this American guy, keyboard player, who I'd done some sessions with, and it's one of those serendipity things, because in those days, I didn't have an answer. I don't even know if there were answer phones at that time.
Yes.
So I was over there and I'd answer the phone, or he wouldn't have bothered chasing me up about it. Yes. So he called me up and just said, there's a band looking for a drummer. I think, you should go for it because it's kind of, suit you. So I got auditioned by the bass player who was in the band first to check me out, and then we got on okay. And it was the Thompson Twins were actually in the middle of recording their album at Rack Studios.
Right.
So I went there, set up the drums in the player. They're all kind of basically just mixing, really, in the mixing room. And I was kind of there kicking my heels, really, and playing a bit with the bass player. And they were just in there in the control room, working. And so after a couple of days of doing that, working through the songs just for the bass player, I was wondering what the hell am I doing here? And I remember I just started getting it off my chest, as it were, sort of thrashing out on the drum kit for a while, just I was on my own. And I went to go and get a cup of tea or something in the kitchen, and all the band were in there and had been listening. And they said, "Oh, we were listening to you playing. Well, welcome aboard." And that was my audition.
Right. God, that's impressive. So there you go. So because had they had many hits at that stage?
Yeah, because leading up to that stage, no, it was a 7-piece, and it was a completely different kind of thing. And then the three main characters were decided they'd become more pop, or totally pop, really.
Yeah.
And so they, I don't think they'd had any hits.
No, because it was interesting.
I think they had like minor hits with the previous lineup.
Yeah, because I did an interview with Tom many years ago. I remember right. I was always surprised in their early years. They were sort of a bit of a festy band playing at Stonehenge, actually, which was
completely different.
Which was quite a surprise when I sort of found that out and thinking, God, yes, that was quite a turnaround. So you were on the album, which was then come Quick Step and Sidekick.
Yeah, well, I wasn't. It was kind of all the, when I arrived there, they'd already put down all the drums were programmed. So they wanted some sort of more live stuff overdubbed on it. So it's mainly kind of playing, because I think the hi-hat sound and cymbal sounds at that period were on the, pretty horrible, nasty sounds.
Yes.
So basically, I played cymbals and hi-hats and stuff overdubbed on various songs, just to give it a bit more.
And did you tour with the band?
Yeah. So they had a tour lined up in America and UK, and seemed to be go pretty well, really. I mean, for me, it was a different, because of the 80s, and it was all about a lot of it about electronic music.
Yes.
So I was playing like syn drums, which were these pads, but they were kind of brutal to play on, really, because they were like solid plastic. So you'd have it wouldn't be like a drum head. You'd get a bounce and it's kind of soft and it gives. It's just so, and the technology was so basic that it was, when you hit it, it was either on or off. There was no no subtlety about it. You couldn't play softly or louder. It would be just like bang or nothing.
Yeah, I remember seeing
that was different. And we were playing using, in those days, it was tapes, which had a lot of keyboards and stuff, background vocals on it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting kind of thing to deal with, because at some of the places we were playing in America, it'd get the tape machines would get overheated and they start slowing down, which meant, and I didn't even have headphones or didn't have an ear in those days, so I just had a little speaker next to me that I was playing along to a so-called click track, but it was actually bits of the programmed drums playing along. So if the arrangement had a break of like 4 bars, 8 bars of no drums, they'd be just there, and I'd be like, I hope I'm still in time when it comes back in, sort of thing. And of course, one of the gigs when the tapes started slowing down was Hammersmith. It wasn't Hammersmith Odeon, Hammersmith Palais, is it? I think.
Right.
And of course, everything goes out of tune with the live instruments when the tapes slow down. And it was kind of when Thompson Twins had the hit "Hold Me Now." It was quite a big hit at the time.
Yes.
And so that was, it's supposed to be the highlight of the gig, and it started sort of cranking, slowing down. I was like, there we go.
Yes, a tricky one. What was America like to tour?
That was a real eye-opener. I mean, I think for every musician of that period, or any period really, is the big thing is to go and tour in America. So it was kind of for me, it was like, wonderful experience, actually.
Yes.
Total eye-opener. So, yeah, and I mean, we ended up opening for the Police in San Francisco in one of these big, because the Police were at their height, they were huge, and it was a football stadium.
My God.
I think it was 70,000 people or something. So
yes.
An experience, yeah.
83, it would have been incredible. Did you also do work with Kim Wilde as well?
Yeah, I mean, Kim Wilde. It was purely touring, doing some tours in Europe. So that was that was another experience, a different one. But it was really good because the band were really good and we all got on really well.
Yeah, amazing. Look, actually, can I just pause it here? I really need to go to the toilet.
Yeah, sure.
Wait a minute. I'll just drunk a lot. Yeah. So Kim Wilde, had she also had her she'd also had all those big hits, hadn't she, as well?
Yeah, she'd already, Kids in America, and yeah.
And were they also kind of massive events at that stage?
I think they were. I remember we were playing in Helsinki, and I think it was November, and it was like -40. It was absolutely freezing cold, and we were playing in this ice rink, which was a crazy sort of idea for a venue. But what they'd kind of covered all the ice with a sort of huge tarpaulin thing, so that people could stand there.
Blimey!
Sitting around and I remember the guitarist, as we were sort of preparing, got on stage, is going, "I can't feel my fingers." Luckily, I was playing the drums, so at least I got to warm up a bit. But it was kind of quite a young audience.
I would imagine, because we loved that, her anthems. Had you gone in the studio with Kim Wilde at all, or was it mostly?
No, it was just purely a tour I'd finished with the Thompson Twins, an American tour, and then I was offered to join this tour. So I can't remember the name of the record they were promoting.
I think by then it was the tricky second or third album. At that stage, had you given up the 250 Honda Super Dream? Had that sort of gone back in the garage?
Yeah, it hadn't. I still had it. I still had the bike, and then I swapped it for. I passed my test, and then bought a 750 Honda.
Blimey, dangerous.
So, but obviously I wasn't doing the dispatch riding.
Yes, and then after Kim, then is it the next stage is the phone call for The Cure?
Yeah, it wasn't exactly. Yeah, it was kind of not quite the same setup in that. So I'd literally finished a tour of America with the Thompson Twins, and on the tour, I'd met who ended up my future wife in Los Angeles. So I went back down to Los Angeles, spent some time with her, and The Cure were just finished touring in Japan, and Andy Anderson, their drummer, had a problem, which meant he had to go back to the UK because he was unwell.
Right.
As it happened, Simon Gallup wasn't in The Cure at that point. He left, and so the engineer who'd been working on the Thompson Twins in the studio was playing bass with The Cure, and they were saying, they were kind of the band were thinking, how are we going to do the American tour? We haven't got a drummer now, and they managed to get Vince Eli, who was in Los Angeles, to agree to do the West Coast gigs.
Right.
But he was he couldn't do any more. He had other commitments. So I can't remember how they contacted me, but I think the bass player knew that I was in LA. I think because one of our roadies or something, the Thompson twins, knew him and
Right.
contacted me and said, well, would I do the rest of the tour with the band? So I kind of had to bone up very quickly on, I think it was cassette tapes.
Had you come across the band much before then?
Not in terms of meeting them or anything, but obviously I'd heard their sort of singles and stuff and music around.
Yeah.
But I didn't own any of their albums. I wasn't like a Cure fan at the time or anything.
No.
But I was obviously aware of them, and so I was kind of loath to sort of. I'd just finished a long tour, and I kind of really not that keen on having to start again. I was ready for a break, but then I thought, okay, well, I'll see how it goes, sort of thing. And so they invited me to a couple of gigs to check them out and meet them, and then I joined in a sound check or two before they played with Vince Eli. That was it, really. They kind of, particularly Paul, who's now Pearl, the guitarist, said after 2 sound checks, "You're ready to play a gig now," sort of thing. I was like, really? Okay. So, but what I found was it was in some ways for me it was like a breath of fresh air, because it was very different to the Thompson twins, which was, as I was saying, playing along to clicks and backing tracks and tonic drums, to sort of be playing real drum kit and it's kind of just play. It felt like more like playing live than almost like playing in the studio in a live situation, which was.
And does it take a long time to sort of click with your, bass player? Is that kind of relationship? Is that something that you have to work on much?
Well, the bass player then was, as I said, it's Phil Thornley, who's working with the Thompson twins in the studio. And so, I mean, he's a good player. And so for me, it was really, I wasn't that focused on the bass playing at the time, because it was so much trying to absorb what the whole band sound was, and it was so different.
Yes.
The whole experience of how we were as a band and how we played. And so it's basically, at that time, the band were playing clubs in America, so it's quite small gigs. And I as far as I was concerned, I was just filling in, and then at the end of the tour, that was it, sort of thing. But I was kind of surprised when they were doing a photo shoot backstage or whatever before we went on. But I kind of stood aside while I did the photo shoot, and Robert would say, Robert said, "Oh, come on, you're in the photo shoot." And I was thinking, that's strange. I'm not in the band, But,
yes.
But
do you have many conversations backstage? Do you have many conversations afterwards? Like going through certain songs or certain bits, or discussing arrangements?
There wasn't really much of that at all. It was kind of play your part kind of thing,
Right.
So
it's not like James Brown then. You're not sort of getting glanced at, and
it's definitely not like that at all. No. Getting fined $1 for every bum note you play, sort of thing.
Right.
No, that didn't happen. And then at the end of the tour, Roberts offered to asked if I wanted to play on the album, and it kind of it conflicted with coming up at some more gigs with the Thompson twins. And at the time, for me, you know, that I was being paid really well by the Thompson twins because it was playing quite large arenas in America. And so in terms of making money out of it, it was a step down to play with the Cure.
Yes.
And anyway, as it turned out, I had a meeting with them in Paris. They were recording, and I was kind of contemplating whether I basically felt like, you know, as being a sort of hired hand wasn't really suiting me. So in a sense, I was kind of asking for a position in the band in the Thompson twins. So I couldn't really decide which way to go.
No.
And so the manager, being sneaky as he was, sort of said, "Oh, before we meet up with the band, I'd just like to meet up with you." And so I said, "Well, okay." And we met up, and I discussed that, you know, I'd like to have more input in the band and be part of it, you know, a share in the position of it. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I understand that. We'll see that. Let's talk with the rest of the band when they come." And they came into the meeting, and he just said, "Oh, so Boris has decided to leave the band. So what we've got to do is find another drummer." And I was like kind of taken aback because that's not exactly what I'd said. But I kind of thought, well, I'm not going to backtrack off this. And I thought, crap, you know. So I said, "Okay, guys, that's it," and sort of drove back in a daze.
Yes.
Paris back to London.
Sneaky.
And then I just thought, this completely decided for me that I can go ahead with the Cure thing. And obviously it was the right move. And it was, you know, we went to the studio, we went into a little mini studio in London. Then all the songs had been written by Robert for Head on the Door, this was. So we demoed the music, because how we did it really pretty much all the way through in terms of working the songs was we'd work them instrumentally, and there wouldn't be any singing on them at all. And quite often Robert would be still writing words in the studio when we were doing the actual album.
Yes.
So we demoed them, and then we went into Angel Studios in North London, and just the whole experience was just great. You know, we all got on really well, and we had a good laugh, and the music seemed to work really well. But I was very surprised how well it was received, actually, because while you're doing it, you're kind of just involved in it. You can't see it as being, you know, where it's going to lead to. It's just more just get on and do it.
Amazing. It is. I know. I was talking to Chris Spedding, and because he's appeared on so many classic records, but he said you can never tell which ones were going to be classics. The ones that you think
the throwaway ones are the ones that end up being sort of a big hit or something.
Yes, and the ones that you think this is brilliant, and it just disappears. So yes, that's one of the great albums of the 80s indie scene, really. Head on the Door, wasn't it? So yes, that was. And then after that, do you ever get the kind of a contract of any description, or do you just get told, "Oh, you're on for another year. We've got this album, this tour"? Do you ever get any form of security when you're in a band?
There were, we had contracts that covered periods of time, So it was kind of, and I've always been crap at contracts. I never read reams and reams of legal speak, so turned out okay.
Yes, that's right. But then obviously tour, and then you're on there for the next 5-6 years, aren't you?
Yeah.
That's amazing. What was it like then with the follow-up Kiss Me, Kiss Me one? What was, because that's quite an epic one.
Yeah.
And comes out in a year when there's a lot of big albums coming out that year, aren't there? There's the Prince album, the Last Smiths album, so many.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I think with Kiss Me, because as I said with Head on the Door, it was all written by Robert completely. He'd already got the songs down when I joined, and with Kiss Me, it was more of a band involvement in the songs, and that everybody got together, and well, not got together. Everybody singly put down ideas for songs, and however sketchy it was. So for me, not being playing anything but drums, basically, I got together with Paul Thompson, and we worked songs together, ideas together on tape, and so then after a period of months, we'd all get together and everybody throw their cassettes in the hat, as it were,
Right.
and we'd kind of listen through, and we'd all kind of basically kind of sit there marking out of 10 each bit, each song, and I mean, including Robert's. So out of that, for Kiss Me, we probably had, I think we demoed well over 30 songs, and then out of those, so I think that's why it became a double album, because there were so many.
Yes.
So couldn't sort of narrow it, and maybe could have been narrowed down, I think, but so and we recorded that in south of France, so it was a very different atmosphere. It was kind of we were on this. There's a studio in a vineyard, and we were there for quite a long time. It was kind of quite relaxed in some ways.
Yeah.
It was relaxed and intense. It was very intense in this working in the studios, and then the kind of ambience around it, and the setting was very relaxed with a swimming pool and sunshine and all that. So it's kind of quite a contrast.
Was that your most enjoyable album you did with The Cure?
It was enjoyable. I think Head on the Door, for me, it was really enjoyable because we gelled so well. For me, the Kiss Me album was harder work because there's so many tracks, and in fact, the way we did it at the time was we were putting down drum tracks first. So it's either just drums and me and a click track with Simon on bass, or it might not even be with anyone else, but just with the click track, and then with the changes played on a keyboard.
Yeah.
Just as guidance. And we were doing that day after day. So after a while, it did start feeling a bit like I remember one afternoon we were doing yet another overdub, and I was kind of started getting flashing in my view, and I didn't know what it was. And luckily, Dave Allen, the producer, said, "Oh, shall we call it this evening? Call it for the day." And I ended up having a horrendous migraine, which lasted all night and still carried on the next day. So it's kind of so in that sense, it was quite intense. And at that point, we decided we'd kind of work each track up with overdubs and stuff.
Yeah.
So we're doing. I mean, for the demos, we'd play like a band. Everything would be like basically live. When we were recording, Robert liked doing things bit by bit, layering.
Right.
So, particularly on the Kiss Me album, it was like that. Later on Wish, we'd play live more
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's it's because the vibe of it is quite light and frothy, but obviously
Some of it's like light and frothy. Yeah, that's true.
yeah. And then as the 80s progressed, I mean, the music scene changes quite a lot, isn't there? There's the dance world that starts to appear and ecstasy's appearing, and then slowly the grunge world is starting to emerge. What was it like for you as a musician at that stage, keeping it together, or were you just kind of very focused on that world that you're in?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it was in the studio and on tour. We were pretty much in a bubble. I mean, I think it's it's like I don't know about other bands, but I think probably for a lot of them it's true as well that you're kind of living in each other's pockets, and it's like a family
Yes.
in some ways. And I'd say that ours was probably pretty much a dysfunctional family.
Nice.
So it worked in its way, but it's an interesting dynamic you have with people you're kind of on top of each other on tour all the time.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because having done so many of these interviews, there's a bit of a 5-year narrative of the 80s indie type bands. 12-month honeymoon period, a John Peel single, played, then a John Peel session, the album, The Transit Man, the Art Centres, the second album, bit bigger, the third album, oh, it's all over. Everyone's just gone slightly mad with it. So yeah, it's quite different, isn't it? If you're a punter like me to being in a band like yourself, it's quite a different world, isn't it?
It's a different world. I don't know about the 5 year narrative. And obviously with the Cure, wasn't.
It wasn't 5 years, was it?
Well, I was with them for 10 years.
Yes, so
they were together for what, 3 or 4 albums before
I know. Well, there's the Cure and Susie and the Banshees are quite different to that.
Yeah.
To my brilliant theory, but mostly like all those other bands they start to putter, don't they, or explode?
Yeah. I suppose I don't know. I suppose there is a peak period definitely for things.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, I was in the peak period, I guess. Yeah.
What was it like then, sort of coming off that one then and getting into Disintegration? You were talking about being dysfunctional. Was it difficult at that stage as the 80s was finishing?
I mean, I think I read that Robert said that that recording Disintegration was the most fun he had in studio recording. I don't know if he really meant that. I mean, it was felt really productive. It had definitely had an atmosphere around it that was it was still good. There were kind of problems with Lowell at the time. He was not really functioning that much in the studio, so that was kind of it gave it a certain atmosphere.
Yes, a very tricky one. Very tricky. And then we kind of march into the 90s, the John Major years, and the next studio is kind of Wish with is there a few lineup changes at this stage?
Not really, no. I mean, lineup changes already happened with Lowell leaving and Roger taking over keyboards. So it was still the same as Simon, myself, Roger, Robert, and Perry. Perry had already joined a while before. I mean, he originally was our roadie.
Yes.
He kind of took over from Lowell for a bit on the keyboards when Lowell couldn't handle it anymore. So So what can I say? Disintegration was it felt it felt kind of important that we were doing something important at the time.
Yes.
But, you know, definitely didn't. And with Wish also, although when we started recording Wish, we kind of laid down some tracks, and then Robert decided it wasn't really, didn't feel like the right, it was happening like it was the right direction. So it kind of was like almost picking up a piece of paper you'd written your opus on and throwing it out into the bin and start again. So we kind of went back in the studio, and like I said, we wish we were playing more as a live band. So I think we started playing around with the songs, giving it more of an edge.
Yes.
Obviously, with all the albums, there's a variation between the kind of somber, dark stuff and the poppy stuff. So it's the same with Wish, really.
And that was that the last studio album you did with The Cure?
That was the last studio album, apart from just when Robert invited me to play on the acoustic album.
Yes. So then, is it the case that you leave the band? Actually, I have no idea, so I'm asking. Do you leave the band at that, sometime in the 90s?
Yeah, 94. I left the band. Yeah.
Was that a massive moment, or was it a relief?
I kind of felt like I needed to do it at the time. My only regret is the timing of it and how I did it. But I kind of felt I needed to move on. Like I said, being in a band can be like in a dysfunctional family, and it can be take it out of you.
Yes.
I'm talking about physically, but I wasn't too impressed with myself thinking back on it and how, on the timing of it. We just finished demoing the next album and we're about to go into the studio to do it when I said I'm not carrying on. So Robert took it very magnanimously and managed to find Jason to take the spot.
Blimey, yes. So then what's your next move then, the 90s?
Yeah, 90s, I mean, I'd already, at the end of a tour in America with Shelleyan Orphan opening for us.
Yes.
At the end of that tour, they were booked into a studio to do the next album, Vamborator, and the drummer at the time, from what I gather, I think he wanted more money than the record company were prepared to pay. So to do the record, so they kind of he decided not to do it, and they felt pretty stuck. And by then I had a relationship with Caroline. We were in a relationship, and she was musing, God, I don't know what we're going to do. And I said, well, I'll do the album. And it was really kind of, we didn't have any rehearsals. It was basically work the songs in the studio as we're recording, sort of thing.
Fantastic.
So that worked out. Yeah, it worked out well, I think. It was probably looking back on it, on my part of it, I think I was overplaying a bit. I was just having fun with it, I guess.
Yes.
And then so I kept kind of in touch with Caroline and Jem, and we did the odd gig together, small gigs, and then we were put in the studio and we recorded We Have Everything We Need for the following album. So I was kind of kept in touch with Jem. I was with Caroline.
Yes.
And doing little mini projects. But basically, I kind of definitely slowed down in terms of album tour thing.
Yeah. So then, for the next period, then do you just take a break, or do you sort of continue doing little bits in studios or live dates with people?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mixture of stuff. I'd say it's definitely taking a back step in terms of getting really involved in doing, I wasn't really into wanting to do any big tours or anything, and wasn't searching around for a band.
No.
So so then about 20 years ago, I moved down here to France.
Yeah.
Seemed like, I don't know why, seemed like a good move at the time. So, I've got my studio here, and I've had, various little gigs and stuff with various musicians from, locally.
Yes.
But not really anything major. And so with Jem, it's been, he with the Vamberator album, he'd kind of pretty much written it all, and it was all arranged.
Yes, because I was going to say, I did an interview with him a few years ago, and he'd slightly had a offer from, I think, some Italian to say, do you want to record a new album? And then, obviously this was the album that he, I think, was going to be making. So when did you sort of become part of the project?
Well, pretty much straight at the beginning. I mean, he was writing the songs and wondering, is he going to actually record them? And then, this a label in Italy contacted him because they're very keen on Shelleyan orphan stuff, and asked about it. But sadly, Caroline Crawley had passed away.
Yes.
So Jem said, there's no Shelleyan orphan anymore. And the label head said, he said, look, if you want to do your own album, there's a studio offered. And so he contacted me, and it's kind of strange setup in that, because although it was all the way in Italy, we could only have the studio for like 3 days at a time. We didn't want to block book the studio, so we kind of had to do it in bits and pieces. So the first session was about 3 or 4 days, and then COVID hit, so and it was right when it first really exploded, and it was actually in northern Italy, was one of the hardest hit areas. So that put a stop on it. So it's kind of been a bit of a stop-start project in terms of getting the recording done, the mixing, etc.
Yeah, my God, yes, of course, I remember now.
And pretty much Jem is at the helm of kind of promoting and making little videos and stuff.
Yeah. And did your contribution, was that on the musical front or any other?
My contribution?
Yes.
Contribution was pretty much is obviously playing drums on it and percussion, but also veering towards production as well between Jem and I.
Did it feel quite an emotional project to be doing, having sort of, been vaguely with Shelleyan Orphan and with Caroline as well? Did that feel quite a special kind of project to be working on?
It did. It was I think, it's a huge step for Jem, obviously more than me, in that he was so used to co-writing with Caroline and working every song. They'd always get together and check each other out and say, do you like this? Do you like that? So he didn't have that to bounce off in that sense, but he used me to bounce things off
Yes.
It was very different. But yeah, for him, it was and is actually, I still think, a big deal.
Yes, because I think there's one track on the album, isn't there? Zebra Butterfly.
Yeah.
Which is kind of written, about Caroline.
Yeah. But well, actually, he was down here at that time, and we were sitting out in the garden, and they're huge actually. This zebra butterfly, the kind of stripy, obviously black and white stripes like a zebra, kind of landed right next to us, and just sat there, sort of opening and closing its wings. And I think Jem had a bit of a moment there because it was not that long after Caroline had died, and feeling like it was almost like it could be her spirit, coming down saying hello.
Yeah, God, that is it's such a lovely story. I mean, do projects like this, does it have that feeling of linking up parts of the past with your feelings about the present?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you always, all my influences I carry around with me. I think the biggest influence on me in terms of playing is pretty much obviously The Cure, because I was so involved in that. It was an intense period of 10 years.
Yes.
So I mean, I still, even if I don't think about it, I still have dreams of various members of the band and stuff. So it's always there, even though it's a long time ago now. I keep in touch with Robert and Pearl, and actually increasingly even more with Roger. Got together recently a few times.
Yes. And with this kind of album with Jem, are there ever any ideas or project of playing it live? Of doing any live dates?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the plan is that we're going to be doing some dates in Italy in the summer, and how we're going to do it's going to be interesting, because I mean, when we were in the studio, we had Charlie Jones on bass, who plays with he's touring with the Cult.
Yes.
He's pretty much a member now of them, I think, rather than, I think he started off just as a sideman, and I think he's still involved with Goldfrapp.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot on his plate, so I don't think he'll be able to give up the time for it. So that leaves basically myself and Jem as the band. And so we're kind of we've got some musicians lined up who helped a bit in the studio in Italy.
Yeah.
Just going to have to see how it works.
It's quite a tricky one, isn't it, really? Because there's a few people who worked on projects and done albums, but to bring it out live is they're sort of having to work on how to create a sort of both a visual feast, but also getting the sound and production as well.
Well, especially, as there's a lot of orchestration and stuff on the record, a lot of strings and horns and stuff. And it's I mean, I don't think we're not looking obviously to have a string section traveling around with us. So we'll be doing it with keyboards and stuff. And so, I mean, I think Jem's vision is that the live stuff will be quite different. It's not going to be verbose, try to recreate exactly what we've done in the studio in terms of sound.
Yes. I mean, obviously, will there be any potential for playing any Shelleyan orphan material as well on the live date?
I think Jem's quite resistant to that. I think the record label are keen for that, but I understand his reticence.
Well, yes, it will be tricky, but obviously,
especially
yeah. I mean,
a lot of the Shelleyan orphan stuff is the two voices working together, so the harmonies and stuff.
yeah. Well, it does sound. I mean, I love that song. I used to be Lou Reed.
Yeah.
Which again, and there's the other one, which is another favourite, which is, oh God, it's now going to play, isn't it? God, that's me just pushing the wrong button. Yes, The Age of Loneliness and I Need Contact as well. I mean, it's a great album. I'm surprised, I was amazed that it took such a long period of time to record it. It must have felt quite frustrating.
I think COVID cut in and that, that was a long period really. And I think it was just the how the studio, how the times we were able to use the studio, have the studio to ourselves.
Yes.
It would have been, I think, well, I can't say it would have been better because it's turned out really well, but I think, generally it's nice to have the studio and you have, like, say, 3-4 weeks just with the, set up and you just walk in every day and work your way through it and you get kind of, but it wasn't like that. It was kind of a bit of toing and froing. It's quite a long way to and fro.
Once you've done,
he doesn't like to fly, so it's
no
on track each time.
Fair enough. I mean, once you've done this one album, was there feelings of like, because obviously it's a working relationship, was there feelings of like wanting to do another album a bit later on down the line?
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. I mean, it's all down to as my wife's just come in with a cup of coffee.
Oh, fair enough. I know. Sorry, she probably wonders who you've been talking to. Is that? By the way, that painting behind you, is that a John Constable?
No, I know. That kind of looks a bit like it. It's not. I don't know who the artist is. We just saw it. Yeah, we got it. Yeah, we got it in the local town. Basically.
Right. I don't know. Being from East Anglia in the countryside, I've seen a lot of these kind of paintings or reproductions of the Constable.
Yeah, it's quite dark. I mean, it's difficult to see the detail on the screen, but there's...
Right, I got you.
Yeah, because my wife's an artist. She paints. So I'll show you.
Oh yes, let's have a look at your.
Show you one of her paintings. She's really into trees.
Who isn't? God, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
That must have taken so long to get those branches with the sky.
She's very...
that must have taken years.
I'll tell you another one which is quite different, but again, a tree.
God, that is such beautiful. That is stunning.
Well, I'll pass that on to her. She'll be very pleased.
Well, I am a country boy, so looking at trees is kind of my,
Whereabouts do you live then?
Pardon?
Whereabouts do you live?
Well, I grew up in Suffolk, but now I'm living in Norwich. So, yes. So, but I came, I lived, brought up in a village, so in the middle of the country.
What do you do with the interviews?
Oh yes, the interview. So, I sort of put them on my podcast, the Spotify, iTunes, Podbean podcast. And, I've been, like I said, I've been doing this now for quite a few years. So I got up to sort of like 1,400. People seem to absolutely love to hear the story of the musician and their life within the band and the creative process, really. It seems to be quite the thing. And I've managed to do quite a lot of drummers, actually. It's interesting you mentioned click tracks, because there's been a couple who have been traumatized in the studio, actually have ended up leaving the band and getting heroin addictions and a life of disaster, really, after being in that, especially the 90s. That click track seemed to be something that destroyed people. There was a film called she was the drummer in the band with Courtney Love, Hole.
Oh, right, yeah.
And she did a film, and there's also a book came out, Hit Like Hell or something like that. And yeah,
That's a good title.
basically, this time in the studio didn't go well, and she kind of was asked to leave, and it ended
I
badly.
think click track can be a challenge to play with, because if you're play a lot live and you're not used to it, and then you go in the studio, it can, yeah. I mean, for me, I've never had a problem with it. Um, so in some ways, I quite like it, and I know that it's going to be. Well, it also gives. I mean, Robert was very much into using click track in the studio because he liked to be. I mean, like to be able to edit and stuff like that.
Right.
We wanted to, if we had we could do extensive, tracks that last for a long time and then cut it back in the edit in the studio, which is kind of it was different to how it is now. Where
Yeah.
you used to get the razor blade and cut into the tape and could be very accurate, because you want to say you want to cut out like eight bars out of something. Once you've done it, and you mess up. So.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to this particular film. But it was interesting because I spoke to the woman who was the drummer, Patty, and it was a disaster in her life, and it all spiraled downhill. And then a few years later, I did an interview with the producer, and I wasn't sure about whether to talk about this kind of episode in his life. But he became the kind of go-to producer in the 90s with who worked with people like Soul Asylum and Marilyn Manson, Red Hot Chili Peppers, that kind of sound that you had. And I asked him about that experience that he had with this particular drummer. And it was interesting because he said that she was struggling, and he in his story had spent a lot of time with her to try and get the track right, and she just couldn't get it, and she got more and more frustrated, and it
I
became
think
more and
it's
more.
very easy to, in the studio particularly, because you've got a focus on you, to get inside your head, and if something's not working, it's very difficult to kind of force yourself to get it right, as it were. Probably best to sort of give it a break, walk out, have a walk, and come back.
Yeah.
It can be a lot of pressure, and I think when for a drummer, on the whole, quite often, like we were laying down the drums first, the backing track. So you're kind of aware of the rest of the band waiting for you to get your bit sorted and right. So it can be a pressure.
Yes. I don't know if you ever saw the comic strip. They did one called Bad News, and they were often talking about the drummer and why it took so long to set his kit up. But I did an interview with another drummer last week called Andy Child, and he now works with John Waite, but he did David Bowie's tour, Never Let the Glass Spider tour, in the late 80s. And again, it was kind of interesting because I said, how did you get the gig? And it was like, David didn't like the previous drummer particularly because he would either slow down or speed up.
Right.
And they were looking for another one. And the bass player, they'd been checking him out at various clubs in New York, and they went, right, I think he's the man. So eventually he gets the gig and tours with Bowie on that particular experience, which was a bit overblown. But it's kind of interesting how people get the gig, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it's to do with being in the right place at the right time, in some ways. Because I've never been big on. I had a period of time in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, where I was playing with a bass player who was really keen on pushing ahead. He would drag me to auditions. And I think he took me to a band, to an audition with a band called Manfred Mann's Earth Band.
Excellent. That's a kind of a blue. Is that Paul Jim Jones? Yes.
Paul Jones. Yeah, it's kind of There was a band called Manfred Mann, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And then they turned into the Earth Band. And that was the only time I'd ever really gone to one of these big deal auditions with a sort of name band sort of thing. He dragged me along. I didn't really want to go. I walked into the building, and there's a sort of long corridor with these benches, and there's like about 20 drummers all playing on their legs, on their thighs, with drumsticks, doing all their rolls and stuff. And I was thinking, what am I doing here? It's kind of like a one after the other, going in, play a couple of songs, and then walk out again. You just say we kind of put ourselves as like the rhythm section, that you could have as a section, the bass and the drums. But it never really worked for me doing those sort of auditions. It was more like recommendations. If I'd done one thing, it's like the thing with the Thompson twins. It's kind of I played with the guy in the studio, and then he kind of recommended me.
Yes. Well, it was with
safer route, less chance of being denied. Rejected.
Well, absolutely. Because this guy who I mentioned with Bowie, I mean, it was the bass player who'd been checking him out when he'd been playing in New York. And then they get the rehearsal with Bowie. And the first day, they're there doing it. And he said David turned around and gave him the thumbs up. He said, that's it, really. He's in the band.
Yeah.
And there you go.
I can really imagine the feeling up to that point. It was a bit like that with the Thompson twins. It was what am I doing in the studio, just playing on my own? And they're all kind of over the mixing desk sort of next door, although obviously they came in and said hello and stuff. And I was thinking, when am I there? When is this auditioning happening? Is it an audition? Am I auditioning at the moment? Am I waiting for it? Is it going to, they seem pretty relaxed about it.
Yes. Do you ever hear from Tom and the band?
Yeah, well, not for a while, not for a long time now. I did go and visit with Helen, my wife. We went over they were in Auckland, in New Zealand. We went over and visited and stayed with them, which is really nice.
Yes.
That was when they were together. I don't think they're together anymore. That's a long time ago. But yeah, so I haven't, but now I've kind of lost touch. I'm not very good at keeping in touch with people. It's a shame. It seems to be, I don't know if it's the same with other musicians, but I played in loads of different bands and setups. And when you're actually together as a band, you're kind of really close and your mates and everything. And then if you move on to something else, kind of lose touch with them,
I think it's the same with the work world. You think, oh yes, this is my little group. We see each other every day, and then when you finish, and you might occasionally have the odd correspondent, but those moments have gone, haven't they?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, look, Boris, thank you ever so much for this. This has been amazing. And, I look forward to hearing how your summer goes and hopefully live dates, which will be incredible.
Yeah. Well, Jen was singing your praises, saying you're a really nice guy. I can see he was right. So, anyway, yeah.
It's lovely, yes. Well, I remember seeing that little clip of Shelleyan Orphan on the tube. Can you remember that? The Friday evening.
Yeah. Well, yes, quite. Well, I think that's what that particular clip on the tube was. Robert saw it, and that's why he decided to have Shelleyan Orphan open for the Cure. Yeah.
Yes, that must have been a nice little for us fans. I didn't go to that tour. Oh, I would have seen you at Glastonbury, wouldn't I, in the early 90s?
Yeah.
When the helicopter came down.
Yeah, because somebody passed out or something, or I don't know. Yeah.
Yes.
We had to stop playing and everything. Yeah.
God, that's so. When did you manage to see that? Because it seems a bit like it can't be true, but it was a helicopter, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think she was helicoptered to hospital or something. Yeah.
I remember. Did you ever enjoy those big festivals?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge kind of buzz, really. a big crowd like that. And it's just that, I thought it was great. I mean, it's weird because when we were playing, we quite quickly started, playing from, one step up to the next one. We play up to arenas, having played clubs, and then the following tour it would be stadiums. And
Yes.
for me, when after playing the sort of big gigs where it's just like a huge crowd, and you're kind of just in there with the music, and it's just a mass of people, and then you do some following tour, you do a warm-up gig with just fans, and it's like a couple of hundred or whatever, a few hundred people. I found that more nail-biting than playing the bigger ones, to be quite honest, because you're kind of aware of people who are much closer to you, and you're kind of more, yeah.
It must have been incredible, those kind of, Glastonbury experiences, actually. Just the crowd and energy of a place, and the pyramid stage as well.
Yeah, I think the Glastonbury is always really joyful setup, just as people get into it.
Yes, nice one. Right, well, look, I'll let you groove on, but thanks again, Boris, and
okay.
Take care. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that, dear listener, is rock and roll. And also that is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Boris for giving me the time for that interview. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, it's always nice, as long as it's positive and friendly. You can check out those social media platform sites, David Eastaugh, C86 show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. So, yes, you can delve in and get lost in them and think, my God, that's a lot. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.